Game oh, Game Informer recently did a greatest game of all time poll, which of course The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time won. Right? This is not a big surprise. Like it always ends up winning these things. It's kind of like the go-to thing, the expected thing. And unfortunately, a lot of other great games were shafted in favor of bad ones. Elden Ring got a lot further than it should have. Baldur's Gate 3 got a lot further than it should have. They lost to Zelda, actually. So Baldur's Gate 3 isn't even as considered as good as Ocarina of Time, let alone Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild. Yeah, good luck establishing Baldur's Gate 3 as the Tears of the Kingdom killer long term, guys. But yeah, like there were a lot of like questionable games on that list. The Last of Us Part 2 was on there. But the thing that really shocked me, and the thing that like I've been noticing a lot lately when it comes to these kind of like greatest game of all time polls, is that Undertale is consistently on them, right? I always see them on IGN's top 100 list. I always see like them getting nominated, it getting nominated for these polls, right? I'm always seeing it on there, and it gets handedly defeated by like whatever it's put up against. Whether it's Zelda or Metal Gear Solid 3 or like whatever, it is immediately knocked out. Nobody cares about Undertale. Nobody. And like it's gotten to the point where like I really wonder why it's even being put there, right? Why it's being acknowledged in this way. And of course, like it's to give Toby Fox some legitimacy. Like he's infiltrating the Japanese gaming industry right now, so they need to give him as much credit as possible. But like, bro, it's been almost a decade. I have never seen Undertale get past like the first round of the greatest game of all time poll since like 2015, right? When like the fans rated that Game FAQs poll and had it win the entire thing. And then like it's never been able to repeat that success because it isn't relevant. Nobody who knows anything about games thinks Undertale is a particularly well-made, interesting, greatest of all time title, right? Nobody thinks that, and yet consistently, I'm seeing it brought up in these lists on these polls, and I think what's happening, I really do think this is that like game journals are hoping that by putting it on these lists, putting it in like round one of these greatest game of all time polls, putting it like so low down on these greatest game of all times list, like they're hoping that the game takes off in popularity and it remains popular, that it remains relevant, that people keep talking about it, right? Because there's no other explanation for this, right? Because like there are dozens of games, hundreds, honestly, probably thousands, to be completely bluntly honest with you, like probably thousands of games out there that are way way better than Undertale, that way deserve its spot in like this, its position in these lists, right? But like every time you go through like the top 100 list, every time you go through the very bottom, you're gonna see Undertale like shoved in your face every single time. I've had this happen to me every time I'm curious as to like where what IGN is putting on their top 100 list. Pretty consistently I see Undertale at like 86 or whatever. Like in the latter 15, like the top 100, right? Like it's not high up on the list at all, but the problem is that like it's there to begin with, right? It really does feel like companies like IGN, these game journals, they're really trying to like seep it into like the public consciousness, trying to keep it relevant, trying to keep it like on the fringes of gaming culture, trying to like paint it as this massive cult classic when it's really, really not. I have a huge problem with people who pretend that Undertale was some massive thing, that it was some of the one of the biggest RPGs of the decade, or like one of the best games of all time. Like it was the Power World of its time, right? Where it came out for a week, people were like spamming 4chan with it or whatever. YouTubers praised it as the greatest game of all time, and it just kind of fell off, right? It never really regained that relevancy. But ever since then, we've been seeing the audience for it like try to say that like, oh, nothing has captured my imagination the way Undertale has. It's one of the greatest games of all time. It's so funny, it's so original. But like in reality, it's really nothing special because nobody outside of that Tumblr SJW woke audience really believes that, right? Like that's kind of the issue here is that like the game has its audience that are invested in it purely for political reasons, and like outside of that, like it has no appeal at all. Right, like that's kind of the issue. Like it has no artistic merit. There is no quality to it. There is no reason to play this game unless you're trying to like understand like the community, right? Understand why so many people are in love with it and are like weaponizing it the way they do, right? Like the game essentially exists as like a vehicle to like launch Toby Fox's career in Japan, right? Like that seems to be like the purpose behind it, right? And I don't see. I never really saw a lot of people call this out. Like I'm not gonna say it's like some fringe thing anymore, because I have seen people like bring this up and discuss it and things like that. I've kind of spearheaded that myself, but at the same time, like his career has pitfalled, right? It has been in a spiral, right? It's crazy to me that like he works on Pokemon, right? That like he was directly involved with like the last two generations of Pokemon, right? And people tried hyping that up as a big thing, like, oh, look at him, he's working on the biggest property in the world, but like nobody really cared. Right, you can see this on like YouTube and stuff like that. Like the songs he composed, like they get overshadowed by the songs done by the real composers. Like it's not some big career boosting thing to work on Pokemon, right? Just look at James Turner, right? After he puts out the Plucky Squire, like what is he gonna do after that, right? Like just look at that guy who produced like a uh oh no, that was James Turner, wasn't it? Like Tembo the Badass Elephant. I was about to make fun of that game, but like no, that was a James Turner thing. Yeah, um like working on Pokemon isn't gonna make you some like highly respected Japanese game developer. Like the issue is that like Toby Fox really thought that being accepted by the Japanese would make him a celebrity, right? It would really make him popular. But in reality, like people like Itoy, Shigesato Itoy, his idol, and I think one of his biggest enablers, those people do other things outside of games, right? They're essayists, they have businesses, they do other things, right? Like Fox in a lot of ways never evolved, right? The instant he got fame, the instant he got money, he stopped producing content. And as a result of that, he was not able to maintain its relevancy, even though game journalists constantly try to shill him. Like this is one of those things with about Gamergate that I wish more people fixated on was that like, we all know that like game journalists hate games, right? We all know they have terrible taste, but like what games are they advocating for specifically? What games are they saying are great? Right? Like, you have games like Destiny, which I talk about a lot, and you also have stuff like Undertale. You have stuff like Gone Home. Like Undertale, I think, is a way more blatant case of like game journal corruption than like Gone Home ever was. But like for whatever reason, it wasn't really like it never really caught on in the community the way that like Gone Home did, right? Like Undertale was a joke right from the get-go, and I really want that to be one of the things that Gamergate talks about, going forward, is how people like Toby Fox are pushed forward and promoted by corrupt actors in the gaming journalism industry.